In this video, I'm going to answer the test review questions 1 through 10, starting with number 1 on your test review. For the problem that says determine if lines AB and CD are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. There are 3 different ways that we talked about doing this problem. One way is to make the table to determine the 2 slopes. Once you input your ordered pairs into the table, you want to find the slope. And remember, slope is the change in y over the change in x. So when we look, how did we change from 4 to 9? We added 5. How did we change from -2 to 3? We also added 5. So when we write the slope, we say the change in y value over the change in x value. You can either type this into your calculator or know that this reduces to 1. We're going to do the same thing for the second 2 points to see the slope of those 2 points. This is going from -6 to -3, so that's getting closer to 0, so that's positive 3. We went from a negative to 0, so that's getting positive 3. Remember, when you write your slope, it's y value over x. So we say the 3 on the right side, which is our y value, over the 3 on the left side, which is our x value. Again, this reduces to 1. Now we can compare these 2 slopes. Since they are exactly the same, that tells us that these 2 lines are parallel. Question 2. The second way that we talked about that you can find the slope of any 2 points is by plotting those points on a coordinate plane. So you can take a piece of graph paper and do a sketch of the 2 points to see what their slopes are. When I plot those points, we get 4, 0, 2, -1. We're going to find the slope of these 2. Then we're going to find the slope of -3, 1, and -5, -3. Simply by plotting the points, it's obvious to me that these are not parallel because they will eventually intersect somewhere in this area. It is also clear to me that they do not make a right angle, but I need to state that using math. So what I'll do is I'll find the slope of this side over here. To find the slope, we calculate the rise over the run. I rise 4, and I run 2. So I get 4 over 2, which we can reduce to just 2. On this one over here, I find the rise over the run. I rise 1, and I run 2. So my slope is 1/2. When we compare these 2 slopes, they are not exactly the same. So again, I can say they are not parallel. For them to be perpendicular, they would need to be opposites and reciprocals. Opposite means one is a positive and one is a negative. Since these are both positive, it does not meet the opposite requirement. However, it does meet the reciprocal requirement. But that does not mean that, that means they are not perpendicular. Therefore, our answer is neither. Question 3. For question 3, the third way that we talked about finding slope was just by using the slope formula. The slope formula is just the change in y's over the change in x's, which is the same thing we were doing from the table and the same thing we're getting from the graph. So you subtract your y values first. I'm going to look at my 2 y values. And the order that you subtract them, you can also say y1 minus y2 and x1 minus x2. It's just important that you keep the order. So I'm going to say -3, take away 12. And then since I went first pair to second pair, I'm going to go first pair on my x's, 7 minus -4. You will be allowed a calculator on this test, so if you'd like, you can type these into the calculator. 2 negatives will turn to a positive. So we get -15 over 11. 11 does not divide into 15, so we would leave this an improper fraction. For the next 2, Again, we start with our y values. So I look at my y values, and we'll start with negative 10, take away 12. Then you look at your x values, negative 12, subtract negative 18. We will get negative 22 over negative 30. We can reduce this. 2 negatives is going to make our answer positive. And then we can reduce this fraction by dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2. And we get a positive 11 over 15. Remember, you can also use your calculator to help you reduce fractions if you need that. In your calculator, you can type negative 22, and I'm going to put my negatives in parentheses, so negative 22 divided by negative 30. It gives me a decimal when I put it in the calculator. If you'd like for your calculator to reduce this to a fraction, you can press the math button, enter, enter, and we get 11 over 15. Then we will compare these two slopes, negative 15 over 11 and 11 over 15. These two numbers are not exactly the same, so they are not parallel. For perpendicular, they must be opposite and reciprocal. Opposite means one is negative and one is positive, which we do have in this problem. Reciprocal means that these numbers need to be flipped, and we can see that these numbers are flipped. Since it is both opposite and reciprocal, we get the answer, it is perpendicular. Question 4. It says to find the distance. The distance formula that we use for this is the square root of x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. I like to just think of it as subtracting my x's, so I start by looking at my x values and I say negative 2 minus 3. Then you subtract your y values, 6 minus negative 6, square, add, and square root. We'll simplify and we get negative 5. Remember, it's very important to put your negative 5 in parentheses. These two negatives turn to a positive, so we get 12 squared. Negative times a negative is a positive, so we get 25. 12 times 12 is 144. Combine those and we'll get 169. You can use your calculator or know that this is a perfect square and the perfect square of 13. So the distance between these two is 13 units. This is one method of doing this. You could also do Pythagorean's theorem if you wanted to, and you would get the same answer of 13 units if you used graph paper. Number 5. State whether the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. We're given two equations. So again, with parallel, perpendicular, neither, what we need to know is the slopes. This is in slope-intercept form, which is good for me because then I can tell right away that the slope is 7 over 3. In the second problem, it is in standard form, which means I cannot look at it and see what the slope is right away. You can recall that we talked about slope is the opposite of A over B when it's in standard form. So if you recall this, then we can say the opposite of A would be a negative 3 over B, which is 7. However, if you didn't recall this, you can always take this equation and solve for y to get it into slope-intercept form. When we're solving for y and trying to get y by itself, we move the x away to the other side by subtracting 3x from both sides. So we get 7y equals negative 3x plus 14. Then we can divide both sides by 7 to get y by itself. Our goal is to get y by itself because we want to be in slope-intercept form. So we get y equals negative 3 over 7x plus 2. Then again, this is in slope-intercept form just like our first equation was, and we can see here that our slope is negative 3 over 7. Then we can compare these two and see that they are opposites and reciprocals because one is negative and one is positive, and they're flipped, which gives us the answer of perpendicular. Number 6. These are both in standard form, which makes it, or slope-intercept form, I'm sorry, which makes it easy for us to see our slopes. We have a slope of negative 2 over 3 and a slope of negative 3 over 2. They are not exactly the same, so it's not parallel. For them to be perpendicular, I need to check to see if they are opposite and reciprocal. They are not opposites because they are both negative, but they are reciprocals. But remember, for it to be perpendicular, it has to be both, so this leaves us with an answer of neither. Number 7. Stacy lives at the point 6-3, and her friend's house is at negative 2, negative 7. The mall is the halfway point for Stacy and her friend. Halfway point is another way of saying the midpoint. And when we're finding the midpoint, you add your x's and you divide by 2. And remember, your final answer needs to be in a point, so it needs to be an ordered pair. So to find the midpoint, we add the x's. So I'm just looking at the x values of the 2 points. 6 plus negative 2, divide by 2. Then you just look at your y values and you add them. 3 plus negative 7, divided by 2. We will get on top 4 divided by 2, and we'll get negative 4 divided by 2, which gives us 2, negative 2. So the halfway point, or the midpoint, is at 2, negative 2. Question 8. Find the area of triangle XYZ. We'll need to start by plotting our points, negative 2, 3, which is x. It's important that you also label it. 1, negative 1, y. And z is 5, 2. We can see that this is a triangle. For me to calculate the area of a triangle, I need to know 1/2 base times height. Before I can move on, I'd like to confirm that this is a right angle, because if this is a right angle, then I know one of these is the base and one of these is the height. To know if they are perpendicular, their slopes need to be opposite reciprocal, so I'm just going to quickly check that. From here to here, I can see that I went down 1, 2, 3, 4. Down 4, so I get negative 4. And then I went over 1, 2, 3. On my other slope here, I went, this is a positive slope, so we went negative 3 over, and then if I go backwards to the left, negative 4, which reduces to just 3 over 4. When I compare these two, I can see they are opposite reciprocal, so this is a right angle. Since this is a right angle, then I can find this distance here and this distance here of these two sides to find my base times height and plug it into formula 1/2 base and height. So my base, and we've talked about this, that if this creates a 3, 4 on your legs of your right triangle, then we know, because this is a Pythagorean triple, that this side will be 5. So I know the base of my triangle is 5. Again, over here we have another 3 and 4 on my legs of my right triangle, so I know that this side will be 5 because this is our famous Pythagorean triple. So we have 1/2 of 25, which will give me an area of 12.5 units squared. Number 9, write the equation that passes through the point negative 2, 1, and is perpendicular, keyword perpendicular, to y equals negative 1/2 x minus 4. Perpendicular tells me I have to have the opposite reciprocal slope. So when I look at this slope, I have a slope of negative 1/2, but because I want perpendicular, my perpendicular slope has to be the opposite reciprocal of that. Opposite of a negative is positive, reciprocal 2 over 1. So I get a slope of just 2. There are 2 ways that we talked about doing this in our notes. One way was to use the point slope form, so I will write the point slope form. I'm going to put m perpendicular here because we need to make sure that we're using this number and we are no longer using this number when I use the slope. Then we say x minus x1. So you're going to substitute numbers into the 3 places that I've highlighted. And when you simplify and solve for y, this will give you your equation. So we get y minus 1 equals 2 times x minus negative 2. This just turns to a plus 2. We're going to distribute. We get y minus 1 equals 2x plus 2. Add 1 to both sides to get y by itself, and we get y equals 2x plus 3. This is our equation of the point, and this passes through this point and is perpendicular to this one. Number 10. Same thing, we're writing an equation that passes through this point, x and y, and is parallel, which means the slopes are exactly the same. Since this is in standard form, we need to either solve for y by moving the 2x over, or remembering that slope is the opposite of a over b when in standard form. So when the 2x crosses over the equals, it becomes a negative 2x. So I can see that my slope is negative 2. If I want the parallel slope, it has to be the same, so it's also going to be negative 2. Remember, we try not to use this number anymore once we come up with either the parallel or perpendicular slope. The other way that we learned about doing this problem is just plugging into y equals mx plus b. So you're going to plug in the 3 places where I highlight. In this case, you're going to solve for b, and once you find your answer for b, you will use b and m to write your final equation. So when I plug in for y, I get negative 4 equals negative 2 for my parallel slope times x, which is negative 3, plus b, and b is what I'm trying to get by itself. B is what I'm trying to identify, so I can use the m and the b to write my equation. I get negative 4 equals positive 6 plus b. If I want to get b by itself, I need to move the 6 away, and when the 6 moves to the other side, we subtract it. So I get negative 10 is equal to b, or b equals negative 10. We use this, what I found as my slope, my y-intercept, and my slope to write the equation in y equals mx plus b, so we get y equals negative 2x minus 10. These were problems 1 through 10 on your test review.